This is Cara from Health, Home, and Happiness, and today I am so excited to have Teresa on here, who's going to talk about MTHFR, the gene mutation, and folate versus folic acid. This is something that's super new to me. Teresa, actually, I think she texted me maybe 6 months ago and saying like all this stuff about folate, and she had so much passion, and I know she's so diligent at only using supplements that are really effective for her family, and she really does her research, that I was willing to try it, and I saw that the methylated folate really did make a difference in mostly myself, honestly, and maybe a little bit for my children. And since then, I've done a lot of research on MTHFR, and I think it's something that does affect our family. And so it's something that I think is super important that we be mindful of. And I'm excited to share today. So welcome, Teresa. Thanks for coming on the show with us.
Oh, thank you, Cara. I'm so happy to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and like what
Yes.
brought you to research MTHFR?
Well, I have 11 children, and we've been on the GAPS diet, and most of us are now off of it. We just, because of supplementation, we've been able to get off of GAPS diet after 3.5 years. But 4 years ago, when I realized how important nutrition was, we changed everything. I mean, at the time I had 7 children, and we had kids with various issues. One mainly that just had really severe ADD. It was just kind of sending me over the edge of sanity. And so I got really desperate and decided to, change everything about our life. And so then in 1 year, we added 4 more children. And every single child has just been, including my husband and myself, have just benefited so much from GAPS, like just amazing transformations. But the whole goal of GAPS is to be able to come off of it, although I'll never eat the standard American diet. And I always kind of thought we would just go paleo, but I didn't really know what we would do after GAPS. But get off GAPS. I couldn't get my kids off GAPS because they just all their symptoms would come back. Not all of them, but the ones that had the hardest time were having the worst symptoms come back. And I just decided we were going to do this as a family, and I really kept us, even though some kids I know could have moved off, I just kept us all on GAPS because I really didn't feel I could manage all those different diets. So we've done GAPS and had just great success, but like I said, trying to get off of it. And my one son who motivated us to even do this, he was just kind of, his behavior was getting bad again. Like he would argue with me all the time, not near as bad as when we got on GAPS in the first place, like not near like that. But, as their behavior gets better, it's like your standard gets better, it gets higher. So I was, anyway, his big symptom that drove me nuts was just this argumentative thing. And also I couldn't get him, really, he couldn't hardly handle too much honey or almonds, different nuts. Even full GAPS, he wasn't really able to embrace. So his behavior with this arguing just drove me insane. And I have a cousin who knew about methylation, and I'd read some blogs about tongue tie and MTHFR, and honestly, I just felt like I just could not research one more thing. I already had 11 kids doing this cooking and just everything. I homeschool. I just felt over my head as it was. And we didn't just do diet. We were trying amino acids and liver cleanses and just anything to get my kids well. And so my cousin told me about this MTHFR, and I knew. Oh, and then I learned about like tongue ties. I'd never heard of tongue ties before. And then so we, because this is what we do, we go around checking everybody for tongue ties. And my one son that has the hardest time and the biggest struggles in this area, our motivation for the diet, he had a pretty severe tongue tie. And so then I was reading a lot about midline defects and MTHFR, and that really still wasn't enough. I was still I just can't do it. But my cousin, who was, really bugging me about this, she gave me a B complex, like some leftovers that she'd had. And I thought, okay, we'll give it to him. And I'm not a magic pill person. I never believed in magic pills. I figured if good things were going to come, it was going to be through hard work. But I was desperate. So I gave him the pill. And then within 3 days, I completely noticed the difference, like huge. I kept asking my husband, are you seeing what I'm seeing, or am I exaggerating, or what's going on? He goes, no, Teresa, I really think that you're seeing like a huge change. So then I got excited, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there is a magic pill. And so I started researching, and just I have all of our kids on except one. We have a little Korean girl that I think she had awesome gut health when she was born, so she actually doesn't use anything. And I actually don't use anything either, except like a multivitamin that has folate and B12 in it, but not huge amounts. But yeah, so then we're here, like just learning about the MTHFR gene mutation, and I'm just loving this supplementation. It's tricky, it's complicated. I don't really completely understand it by any stretch, but I know enough that I've found the supplements that have helped my kids just in huge ways.
That's that's so exciting. A lot of people, because my daughter did have autism, like diagnosed autism, a lot of people ask me what I think about the autism gene. With the GAPS diet, she no longer qualifies for an autism diagnosis. I do feel like MTHFR might be the autism gene, and that children that have this gene mutation, either only one of them or both of them, are more susceptible than environmental toxins and gut dysbiosis and even vaccine or toxin damage. So when people ask about the autism gene, I think that it's probably MTHFR. This is all pretty new to me, but it's just something that I'm trying to look into more. There is one study, and I can link to it below, about how people with the MTHFR, I think it was 50 years ago when the smallpox vaccine was coming out, they did find that people with that gene mutation did have severe reactions to the smallpox vaccine. So it is plausible that there's this certain group of people. I think do you know what the percentage it is that has the gene mutation?
Of our population,
Right.
over like 40 to 50% is what I've
Is it
heard.
40 to 50%?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's plausible that that's why some families can seem to just do everything wrong and their kids are just super healthy still. And then other families, we really work hard and our kids struggle more,
Yeah. Yeah.
as it might be this gene mutation.
Right. And I have heard, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I read that 98% of kids with autism have this mutation. So that's
Really?
pretty high. Yeah.
That's crazy high.
Yeah.
Do you know how we can tell if we have this mutation? Like, obviously there's the lab tests, but for families, I'm not a big lab test person. You talked about the tongue tie. Is there anything else to look for?
Well, you know, when I think of, I don't know, anybody that has like ADD behaviors, are kind of squirrely. I don't know. I just am like, you have a 50-50 chance of having the problem. So I would just tell people, just try it. Like, that's why I just tried my whole family. I have a kind of unusual group of all these kids coming from, kind of traumatized backgrounds. So I probably have, a 98% mutation rate in my family. But I mean, even if it's just 50%, it's worth trying it just to see if you see your child struggling. My kids go around asking people, let me see your tongue, so they can check out tongue ties. And then if they see kids that have dark circles under their eyes, or really thin, or acting, just weird or off or inappropriate and not wanting to behave, my kids diagnose them on the spot. They need gaps. They're mutants. Not in a mean way, like a condemning way at all. Just like something's up is what they're thinking, and they figure, because their experience as gaps or MTHFR, they just go to those two things.
Right. That's sometimes people will try to avoid putting labels on and being, we should accept all the diversity of people, and definitely we should definitely be accepting of all different people, but we also, there's things we can do to help them acclimate to life and not be so overwhelmed by things, and not have the tongue tie. Like, babies that have tongue ties do have problems nursing. So I think what we didn't quite cover yet is that you're talking about folate. When you took the B vitamins, it had folate, which was not folic acid. It was the natural form of folate, or was it the methylated form of folate?
Well, you know what? I first was exposed to was the methylated form, and we have also tried the natural form, just in the vegetables. Like a raw vitamin from the health food store. We've tried both of those, and I do think the raw vitamin does help, but our family across the board just do better on the methylated. I think their body can take that in easier.
That sounds good.
I
And
mean,
then,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to touch a little bit about folic acid, and can you tell us a little bit about why folic acid is so important for people with MTHFR gene mutation to avoid?
Well, and just let me just do a little disclaimer is this is like fairly complicated, and for sure if you're listening to this, go online or just you definitely do research. And I'm not like an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But what from what I can understand is folic acid for these people with this mutation, it actually can bind to the receptors that the receptors actually want folate, and they want to take it in so they can the whole methylation process works more accurately, more effectively. And the folic acid, these little mutants can't turn it, they can't make it useful to them, the folic acid. And so the methylated folate is almost like a pre-digested folate. Their body can just absorb it so much easier.
And yeah, and it is the binding of the receptor sites, which is why, and folic acid, if you haven't looked, it's fortified with everything because folic acid in most of the population, and even a lot of people with the MTHFR gene mutation are able to process some of the folic acid, just not enough. And so deficiency in folic acid, which is a synthetic manufactured form of vitamin B9, does prevent neural tube defects. And so that's why it's in so many of our foods. Like I was trying to buy almond milk the other day, and I looked at container after container of almond milk, and it was fortified with folic acid. Most well known, it's in flour and like crackers and breads. So it's really in most of Americans' diets is folic
Yeah.
acid, the synthetic form. And so that, even if you can process a little bit of it, then hopefully your body's getting enough that you're not showing spina bifida, because they did show studies like since folic acid has been supplemented, the spina bifida rates have gone down. So that is effective. But the problem is that if we're only able to process a tiny bit and then it's binding these receptor sites so we can't get the real folate in, our bodies aren't getting the folate, the B9 in the usable form that we need, and stuff showing up in our children, like the midline defects, like the tongue tie. And
Right.
that's what we're concerned about. And not only the tongue tie, but also is connecting the hemispheres of the brain. That's also a midline defect. And that's what a lot of children with like the sensory processing that we talked about in another webinar is children with sensory processing issues. It's thought that they might not be connecting the hemispheres of their brain well. And that can go all the way down to having a pelvis that's not open enough so that it's harder for us to give birth, and just all the way down the midline, which is important stuff like nasal passages being wide enough. Those are all midline defects.
Right.
And so spina bifida obviously is detrimental, and anencephaly is being born without a brain, which is what society was trying to fix by supplementing everything with folic acid. So that's why folic acid is in so many things. But for people with this gene mutation, it might be super important to actually avoiding folic acid because it's binding to those receptor sites, and we're not able to use it because we don't have the enzyme needed to turn folic acid into the usable form of B9 for the body, or turn enough of it into. And then also to maybe supplement with methylated folate, which you talked about, which is, it's also a synthetic vitamin, but it's in a much more usable form. And of course, it's more expensive than folic acid, or the natural folate, which is found in like liver and mostly green vegetables, I believe.
Yeah.
Does that all sound right to you?
Yep. That sounds about what I've heard.
Okay. And so MTHFR, I know you did the GAPS diet, which we have another webinar on the GAPS diet that I hope you all listen to. But for those who don't know, GAPS diet is a healing diet, and it's made of all whole foods. So folic acid is found only in foods that have been fortified. And so the GAPS diet completely avoids foods that have folic acid. And this was kind of the missing piece that I think might be why my children don't seem to have many of the MTHFR symptoms, is because they did start the GAPS diet fairly early in their life. So they most likely they weren't getting any folic acid at all, and they were getting lots of green vegetables and liver, which is high in natural folate. So that's how the MTHFR could correlate to the GAPS diet, and why the GAPS diet could actually, even though it's a gut healing diet, it does completely eliminate folic acid, and that's how it can help heal people with this nutrient deficiency. which is unexpected since it's a gut healing diet. Does that sound something like
Yes,
that's
that's
something
yep,
that you found?
yep, that's totally yeah. You might ask me this later, but I think it's interesting that my son, we started GAPS when he was 9, I think 9 or 10, and so for 3.5 years, all he got was meat and vegetables, basically, and some dairy and some eggs, but no processed food. Tons of vegetables, probably not as much as he needed, but like a fair amount. And still, he was absolutely not getting enough folate. So I just think that's interesting that, and I don't know if that's the quality of our vegetables now that our country is producing. I don't exactly know why, but I thought that, it wasn't enough what we were doing.
That is interesting. How old was he when you started GAPS though?
I think he was 9.
He was 9, because that's
Yeah,
like Hannah started GAPS I think when she was 3, and Sam started it when he started solids. So
that's a big difference.
that's a big difference. 9 years is a long time. And like
Yeah,
formula, I'm pretty sure formula has folic acid in it. So if he was formula
it
fed,
does. Yep, and he was totally formula fed.
so that's just getting different stuff from the start. So the sign that we've talked about, the signs that MTHFR gene mutation, that it might be the autism gene, mood problems. That's what I find, because I take the methylated folate and I took it when you started, and I get so much more energy, which low energy and like kind of being anxiety-ish um, is what I tend to if I skip the supplement.
Right.
Um, so mood problems, and I think, have you had mood stability since
They
with your
oh my
kids?
gosh. Yes, absolutely. Like this is yeah, it's just been amazing. So I have 3 of my girls are birth sisters. Like they have the same mom and the same dad. And we got one of them tested because I couldn't figure out her supplementation. I was almost certain she was a mutant, but I couldn't figure out what supplement. There's just so many different concoctions you can give them with these B12s or B vitamins. So I had her tested, and she was homozygous for 677. So both she got a copy from her mom and her dad. And so because of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, her sisters who share the same mom and dad, I'm pretty sure they're mutants, at least, maybe not both copies, but at least one. So this happened all about the same time, where these 3 girls really do have like anxiety issues. um, One of them, and I'm sure she won't care if I share this because I shared it on my blog, but she would just she got really stressed about her co-op. We started a new co-op, and she started pulling out her hair, like literally, and that freaked me out because
Wow.
I mean, at the rate she was going, she was making bald, patches on her head, and but that was about, I don't know, about a couple months after that, I figured out about the B12, like the high doses of B12, not just what I'd been giving in the B complex. Because as soon as I figured out this whole mutation thing, I put everybody on B complex. And it helped these girls, but not, not really. Um, but the B12 I gave them, it's the kind I use. It's like this lozenge, and it has like 800 mics of folate and the methylfolate, and then 1,000 mics of B12. And it's a lozenge that you chew. And seriously, it just transformed these 3 girls. They would just, one of my daughters, the oldest of these 3, would go to bed and just have all this anxiety and just couldn't sleep, and just, oh my gosh, I could just go on and on. And all 3 of them, like these 3, they just do awesome with this supplementation. Like I just could never, they did so well. Like I keep saying this, but they did awesome switching their diet to GAPS. But it just, I don't know, this just connected all the dots, and they just have a higher quality, a better sense of well-being.
No, that's great. And that's kind of what I've done is GAPS was kind of my foundation, like reset everything, get your gut health in order. And then we've done, like you said, amino acids, and we've done Chinese medicine, and now we're doing the methylated B vitamins. And I tend to just, instead of getting a bunch of lab tests all the time, if a supplement, like if I look it up thoroughly before I try it with my kids, and I try it for myself first, to make sure there's no reactions with me. And then I supplement for a few days and see if I see an improvement. And if I don't, I back off. And that seems to be, it's kind of the Okie way of doing holistic health, but it's something like a $30 bottle of supplements. It sounds expensive, but if you go get these lab tests, they're super expensive, and that can be prohibitive, where something like this can make such a big difference. And then speaking of backing off, I tried the folate that you recommended, and then I also tried those lozenges with the B12, and they made me so moody. I was crying all the time. It was like ridiculous. It was like PMS times 1,000. So that is something. It's not like a one click fix for everybody.
Right. It
Just
very much isn't. I mean, and then that's one of the things I tell people too. If you take it and, well, you go low and slow, just do a half a tablet or just go really low. But then it seems to work well for you, but then, I don't know, down the road, you start having a return of symptoms. A lot of times you've gotten too much. Your body doesn't just take what it needs and dumps it. It actually can get too much of it. So you do have to really watch for that. If you get a return of symptoms, it's best to slow way down and then just watch how your body feels.
back off. Like, make sure you're kind of keeping a chart of everything that's doing. And when in doubt, like, back off your supplements. Like, I don't want to see people, I hear about this is they're trying to improve their health. So they're like on paleo, but then they have cheat days, and then they take like 12 or 15 different supplements, and they're adding it to green smoothies, and you're just doing, like, when you do that much, you can't tell what's working and what's not. And this stuff is really powerful. It's natural. And especially, I feel like the eating like GAPS diet is really relatively very safe. But when you're doing stuff like supplements and taking way more of a supplement like methylated B12 in a form that's not naturally found in nature, it is important to be careful with it and to watch for stuff and not to just take it because it's natural, but also not to
Yeah.
be afraid of it because it can provide so much healing. If your child actually does, or you have a nutrient deficiency, one little pill can like make your day go fantastic.
Yep. Yep. And I kind of struggle a little bit with kind of, advising people because, especially people that are on the standard American diet, because I've had such great results. I just feel like telling people, oh my gosh, you have to just try this. But then I'll tell them what we use, and then they'll give it to their little child. Even if I'll warn them, you got to go low and slow, and I'll say do a half a capsule or whatever, and their little child will wig out. And so it is really, you have to really take it seriously, really go just, really test them. I don't know if that happens because because the people that have really kind of wigged out, or their diet, I don't know that their diet is really clean yet, or they haven't changed their diet for a long enough time. I've just seen little kids, the mom will call me and be like, oh my gosh, my child's wigging out. Could it be the vitamins? Because really it's a vitamin, and they don't expect to have that kind of a reaction. So just be warned that you can very much have pretty extreme reactions.
Yeah, I feel like the people that are listening to this are pretty they're educated. They're not here because they are just like following a BuzzFeed article that says like, oh, if you do a bazillion micrograms of vitamin C, you'll never get sick.
Right.
That's a good way to get diarrhea.
Okay.
So I feel like I feel more comfortable talking to people about like folate that are listening to this. In my real life, if I know someone's eating the standard American diet, a lot of times they will take the it's natural, so it's safe approach, and they take way more than what I say, or they take the max amount that the bottle says, which bottles are not always super accurate with their dosing recommendations. I don't I don't recommend supplements anymore until people have their diet in order, because I figure if they're doing enough work to get their diet in order and they've done that research to stay on like GAPS or paleo or even just like real gluten-free without a bunch of processed foods, um,
Right.
then they probably have the, I guess, maturity. I'm not sure. They have the inclination, because it's not bad that they choose to do things differently. It's just different, and I don't want them to accidentally misinterpret what I'm saying and harm themselves.
Right. Right.
But I feel like we're pretty good here. Um, have you heard of getting B9 and B12 tested in the blood? Like the levels of B9 and B12?
I haven't, but that doesn't mean anything.
Okay. Because I have heard of people having super high levels of B vitamins in the blood, and I wonder if it's because they're eating the folic acid and they're not their body's not able to process all the Bs that are coming in because the
Right.
folic acid's kind of clogging the
Yeah.
cogs. And this is all skeptical stuff, but this is all stuff that I've researched and talked and thought about. And I know that there's a lot of moms out there, people trying to regain their own health, that are just looking for, give me a direction to go in and I'll keep researching. So that's why I'm talking about just what I'm skeptical of, is that the B12 and then these super high levels of B9 and B12 in the blood are telling people through lab tests like, oh no, you don't need any more B9, you don't need any more B12, where what they really need is the usable forms of it, not the synthetic form.
Right. Right. Nope. I think you're probably right on.
And so yeah, I just wanted to warn about that for the lab tests that you do. So if you take too much methylated folate, like I said, I was having PMS times 1,000. I took an activated charcoal. It kind of binds to what's in your system. Is that something that you use with your kids?
Yep, I do, and it has worked. What my kids, if I have one daughter in particular that very much needs like her high doses of B12, but she also is just pretty sensitive. So she's had taken charcoal. She'll get a headache or get high levels of anxiety, and the activated charcoal works. And then somebody just recently gave me a bottle of niacin, and I've read that that's what you can do also. Just take some niacin and it neutralizes the bees, and then all will be well. But I actually haven't used that yet because they just
That's
gave it to me. So
that's interesting. Isn't niacin like, it's a B vitamin, I
it
believe.
is. It is. And so I probably shouldn't even say this, but it gets a little bit complicated when you get complexes like a B complex, because it has niacin, but that'll neutralize some of the things. And so some people, that's why right now, and who's to say, I don't know what we'll be using in like a month from now, but for quite a while we've been using just the B12 and the folate, the methylfolate, and not the niacin, or not the whole complex, just because I don't know, sometimes that gets complicated because one will neutralize the other, and I don't really understand it. But yes, it
Yeah,
is
well,
in
that
there.
kind of goes back to our whole thing of do the least amount as possible. So if you can get by with just diet, then try 1B. So try like B9, try the
Right.
methylated B full. And
Well,
then
and
if
what I've heard too is, okay, so there's this, you can get this thing called B minus, and it has all the B vitamins except folate and B12. And if you just take, and we don't, I have some of my kids do this because somebody actually gave me this B minus supplement. Um, so then you can manipulate your folate and B12. I think you can do this like more in the beginning when you have no idea what your body actually needs. And then you have, so you take this one supplement that's called B minus, and then you have these other two that you can raise or lower. But it can get all complicated. Right now, the majority of my kids just do the B12 folate lozenge.
that's That's good to know. And all this, it just gives people a jumping off point to like, well, this is how we started. And so if this works for you, then that's great. And if you think maybe you need a little more healing, you could try this, or you could start with that.
Right.
I think this is all helpful. The lentils are also high in folate. I forgot about that. Avocado, if you eat a bunch of guacamole, 30% of your daily value is in 1 cup. And that's where greens can get, like if you look up like, oh, 100 grams of greens has this much folate. Well, like 100 grams of greens is a lot more than 100 grams of liver. Like you have to eat a ridiculous amount of
Right.
lettuce. Like if you boil down a head of lettuce, it's really not that much. So just to be careful of that when you're trying to get it from food, to make sure that you're actually getting all of your food that has a folate in it up to levels, like weigh it out with a scale before you dismiss it as being something that's not needed. So is there anything else that you want to add about MTHFR? I know it's something you're super passionate about, and I was so excited to hear it from you because I believe it did make a huge difference in our family, which is, it's always great when something easy happens.
Right. Well, I didn't really mention this, but a big thing that it's helped us with is skin issues. Like I have a couple kids that I don't know, we did gaps for so long, and they just as my one daughter just, oh my goodness, her skin issues were just horrible, and we thought it was yeast or candida. So we put her on an anti-candida GAPS diet, and she's like, just, she's 13 now. So this was when she was 12, and she would do whatever I asked. Like she'd have this horrid rash on her neck, and then she'd get boils, and it would be, she was so strict and she would not cheat, but I would be like, okay, let's just try a little piece like of a muffin, like a coconut flour muffin, like maybe a half a tablespoon worth, and it would instantly flare up a boil on her neck. It was just so very hard. And I finally, after a long time, I was so resistant to take her to a dermatologist because I knew they put her on steroids, and they did, and I held on to the steroids for a long time because I just didn't, because we spent so much time healing her gut, and to have to do that, but I really was at the end of my rope. It was really, really a bad skin issue. So, and I'd read, if you give them a steroid, it'll help it, but then the rash will just come out somewhere else. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It completely healed it on, it was on the back of her neck, and then it came out on her ankles, both sides, both on the outer sides of both ankles. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And then she would still get boils, and we found like the B12 completely, she can eat we're still on a very nutritional diet, but like we eat oatmeal and popcorn and potatoes and rice, and she can eat it all with like no reactions. And so I don't know, I can't say enough. I just really think GAPS is awesome, but if you've done it for 2 years and you're having like really struggling with issues, you have to at least try it, because it has made such a big difference. And it's so, you have to do a lot of research, and like, there's extra cost, but compared to how, hard GAPS is and how much effort that is, this is like just like a magic pill for us.
Right. And I think it's good because people that have done GAPS, or people that are like actively healing their bodies, if they think they have the MTHFR gene mutation, that kind of gives them a heads up. Like, most people with this gene mutation show these signs, and most people are deficient in this because of the folic acid supplementation, or because they're just not eating the foods that have that natural folate in them. So it's kind of, you're not just trying it blind. It's not like, oh, go and buy this supplement and this supplement and this supplement and try them in this order. It's like, well, you probably have these symptoms,
Right.
and you probably have this gene mutation, which explains why this folic acid that's in everything isn't working for you. So it's not too random.
Right.
There's a thought process. But yes, like we said, we do want you to research this for yourself. This is just what the research that we have done for our family, and that's kind of what my whole blog's about. And I've never really had anyone jump down my throat about it or seemingly do anything too stupid. So I'm hoping that you guys can all make educated decisions, and that you found this this webinar on our very new but exciting breakthroughs with folate and folic acid. And I'm going to pull out, we do use Seeking Health brand. Teresa, you use Seeking Health brand, right?
Yep. And just on a little side note of that, sometimes I run out because I'm just not I should probably just have a standing order with them, but I never know if I'm gonna have to tweak it. So I kind of just don't load up too much, but I do run out, and I'll go to the health food store, and we just really don't have the same results with the plain folate. The methylated folate just works really well for us. And I don't know what they do. I don't know how they know how to make it, but it works really well.
That's good. And just as an aside, I get so much energy. Like, if I'm kind of sluggish, and this is something that so many moms need, especially moms that have kids with special needs, or kids that are on the GAPS diet, or just moms in general, we need all the energy we can get. And so yes, if I'm feeling sluggish, I go and take a methylated folate, and I'm good to go for the day. And it's so encouraging to have something like that. And it's not like a cup of coffee. It's not stressing anything out. It's actually solving a nutrient deficiency.
Right. Yeah, Cara, can I tell you one more story that
Yeah,
this
no,
just
I love
happened?
your stories. Everyone loves your stories.
Well, my mom is not a researcher by any stretch, and she's gotten more used to the whole diet thing since we've been doing it. But she, for a whole year, like over a year, has been struggling with these symptoms, and she describes it as like a racing heart, even though if you took her pulse, her pulse is normal. She felt like her brain was being squeezed, and then she would lose her balance easily. And to be really honest, I have so many kids that I'm trying to figure out their issues that I'm not really researching for other people. And I think my mom just kind of waits for me to research for her. And so finally, after months, I'm like, okay, mom, let's sit down. I sat at my computer. I'm like, type in your I'll type, she told me your symptoms. I typed them in, and and it came back as anxiety. Like the information brought, said anxiety or panic attacks, and she wasn't opposed to it being that. It seemed weird to her that this would all be panic attacks or anxiety attacks. But and I'm like, mom, B12 is supposed to be like fabulous for this, and I have girls that had issues, but my mom's kind of a hard sell. And so I started her, like, of course, low and slow, and then I'd give it to her, sort of thinking that she would take the initiative of, increasing her dose or decreasing, but then she just would never increase it. She'd be on a half a tablet for ages, and I'd finally ask her. And anyway, like, finally, I got her up to, like, I had her take 2 of those lozenges, so that's like 2,000 mics of B12 and then 1,600 of folate. And within 2 days of taking it, her symptoms were significantly decreased, and within a week they're gone. And I have so much glad about that, because I'm like, oh, that it's been like, it was just keeping her housebound, that because she would leave the house and would be afraid she'd fall over, and she's totally relieved of her symptoms. And she is on a decent diet. She just recently started paleo maybe a couple months ago. I don't know if that helped, just sort of setting the stage for it. But I don't know. It's just so worth a shot if you have any kind of these issues.
Right. No, that's so encouraging. I have started, well, because I kind of attract GAPS people to my life, and we enjoy having kids with different neurological abilities over. So a lot of them, I do believe, have the autism gene, the MTHFR gene. And so their parents most likely have it. And so I've started, if the parents are open to alternative stuff and they're into that, I'm just like, oh, let me just give you 5 of these folate and see what you think. And so many times they report back to me, they're just like, I have never had this much energy and focus in my whole life. Not since my kids are born. I clean my whole house.
Yeah, that is so great. And
And
I've written about this on my blog, but so often my heart just breaks for people, because anxiety, it just feels like, and I've had maybe a little bit of anxiety, issues occasionally, but nothing to really, that has been horrible. But with my girls having anxiety, if you kept telling them, just give them stress management techniques, or I don't know how you're supposed to do that with a 4-year-old, but somehow these poor little people are supposed to be able to manage their stress. And to think that, maybe significant amount of time, it's like their body just doesn't have the right nutrients. And my heart hurts for people that don't have any idea about just that this is a possibility, and that I don't care how hard you pray. I mean, not that God's not going to intervene, because he could totally do that. But most of the time you have to seek out healing, or read the right book to figure out your anxiety. I don't know what any of that will do. And not that they're not good, but if your underlying deficiencies aren't allowing you to have those needs met, my heart just hurts for people.
it is when there's such a simple solution. But then, you and I, we've been researching a long time.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we still, it's hard. And I'm sure there's something else next year that we're going to find that's just like folate, just like, oh, this is so easy. This is great.
I know. Yes.
So it's exciting when you're open to stuff to see what comes up. And so since this is what has come up for us recently, we wanted to share it with you. And thank you for attending our webinar. And thank you, Teresa, so much for giving us your energy and your enthusiasm and all of your knowledge about this in your family.
Oh, you are very welcome.
We'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Cara.
Bye-bye.